Furious world leaders are banning Donald Trump and his despicable regime from important international conferences. There was a big conference that was held in Barcelona this past weekend, a pro-democracy conference bringing together pro-democracy forces across the world. Donald Trump and his regime not invited, although Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota gave a speech there. We also heard from President Lula of Brazil. Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain, who was hosting the event, gave a fiery speech where he was saying we need to shut down all of this right-wing MAGA BS and we need to uplift pro-democracy. I'll zoom in on what was going on there. There was also a major conference that was held in Turkey with a lot of the leaders of Gulf states and Gulf cooperation groups. And in no uncertain terms, they talked about how weak the United States security umbrella has been in the region and how the Middle East nations, the Gulf nations, need to develop new and stronger alliances together amongst Gulf nations since they can no longer rely on the United States. They also called out Kushner and Witkoff's behavior, and I'll get into that in a moment as well. And then I've been talking about how Canada has been a major bridge between transatlantic partnerships and trans-Pacific partnerships. Prime Minister Carney basically being the leader of the free world and multilateralism, although we're seeing Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain step up as well. But Prime Minister Carney has now taken over the majority government in Canada. There was a minority kind of a coalition government, if you will, there. The Liberal Party now has taken over in Canada with recent election wins and people changing parties. But some notable facts about Canada right now. A new poll out of Canada shows that over 60% of the Canadian population wants to be a part of the European Union. They want Canada to be a part of the EU. And as the European Union is talking about, and European countries are talking about a NATO without Donald Trump, whether you call it a European NATO or a new NATO, NATO with no Trump, NATO with no United States. It's interesting to see how countries like Canada, Australia, and then looking into Asia, all form a part of like a new NATO where the United States is basically cut out. But I find it fascinating that people in Canada are like, we need to be a part of something bigger, and thinking about, should that just be a security relationship with Europe, which Prime Minister Carney did? Should it be a free trade relationship, which Prime Minister Carney did? Should it be something deeper like joining the European Union? Also, some other facts about Canada that have just come out as well. A lot more Canadians are considering the idea of joining the military there. I mean, before there was very like a reluctance. I mean, Canada always had a proud and strong military, some great special forces, and a great proud military tradition in general, working alongside NATO, working alongside the U.S., which used to be its ally. You go back to some of the biggest battles against fascists. Canadians were there first, on the front line, sacrificing it all. But there has been, I don't think this is a secret, before Trump, more of a pacifist, a less reluctance of joining the military, or the idea that joining the military is a path. But we're hearing a lot of Canadians talk about that, and the latest polling data bears that out. Also in Canada, I'm sure you've heard this as well, to all of our Midas Maple out there, Canadians canceled military special forces operations with the United States in Africa for the past 15 years or so. There have been these special forces joint practice missions that Canada runs with the United States in Africa. Those have now been canceled by Canada. And of course, this goes without saying, but Canada continues to review the F-35 purchases. And I think Canada is looking to buy those private planes from Sweden, or to at least continue to drag out the negotiations with the United States until they can really figure out getting these planes from Sweden and allowing the domestic manufacturing of those planes in Canada. Because when it comes to the United States military equipment, as we saw with the Middle East, or we saw throughout the rest of the world, like the United States removed the Patriot missiles from Asia, right? And the THAAD systems from Asia, and wouldn't provide the replacement parts and some of the other tools because it said, we now have to move our equipment into the Middle East. So to all of the other countries that bought American military equipment, even we're seeing with Donald Trump's unlawful and catastrophic war in Iran, Trump screwed over all these other nations, because once you buy American military equipment, you have to then get it serviced by American companies. You have to get the parts. And then Donald Trump even did things that we saw like with Switzerland and other countries as well, where he like took their money and then where they were buying weapons, and then he transferred it to like other things to buy weapons for America, because there's fine print in a lot of these contracts with the American military that based on certain exigent circumstances, you can shift the money to other projects that benefit the United States. And, no prior U.S. president ever invoked these ridiculous provisions because it would just shatter all confidence in the U.S. But that's Donald Trump for you. So let's zoom in some of these conferences so you can see what's going down. Donald Trump and his regime not invited to attend these conferences, that's for sure. Why don't I take you to the conference that was going on in Barcelona, where you had Prime Minister Sanchez and you had President Lula of Brazil giving very powerful speeches. Prime Minister Sanchez of Spain said the following: "The far right and the right are not shouting because they are winning. They shout because they know their time is coming to an end." That's directed at Trump and MAGA as well. And of course, what we saw with Viktor Orban's far right-wing party losing that election to Peter Magyar. You have Prime Minister Sanchez also saying the following: "Shame on those who remain silent in the face of injustice. Shame on those who exploit workers, who criminalize those who are different, who turn rights into commodities, who defend elite privilege, who support war and violence in Gaza, the West Bank, Ukraine, Lebanon, and the Middle East." Again, directed at Donald Trump and Putin. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez also says, "The right does not lead, the right is fading, so it doesn't matter how much they shout or how many lies they invent. People are realizing they have no project, no solutions, only hate, empty slogans, and misguided policies that have brought just four things to the world: war, inflation, inequality, and social fracture. That is all they have given the world." I think it's important to have conferences like that and to hear speeches like that, because for far too long you have this MAGA right-wing stuff spreading throughout the world, whether you saw it with Bolsonaro in Brazil, whether you saw it with Javier Milei in Argentina, right? You see it in El Salvador with Bukele. You see it with what was building right before Donald Trump really exposed, I think, in a major way to the world. It should have been exposed before, the dangers, the bankruptcy of this far-right MAGA movement, which is international in scope, this right-wing authoritarianism movement. Think about it. You look at Canada, their maple MAGA was going to win, right? Pierre Poilievre, lots of people expected that he was going to win. And then Canada went elbows up. Prime Minister Carney won the election. Not only that, but then recently got the majority, and he's very popular in Canada. Look in Australia. What's up, Midas Mates? What's up to the Midas Down Under? There, you all know you had Dutton, you had Timu MAGA and that movement there. But by the way, there's still a right-wing movement that's building over there. But Timu MAGA, many people expect we're going to win. And then Dutton didn't even win his riding there. Anthony Albanese went on to win a big election over there. When you had the Labour Party beating their Liberal Party in Australia, their Liberal Party is their right-wing party, which became a far right-wing party as they were adopting a lot of MAGA stuff. Viktor Orban, Reform Party in the UK, Le Pen's party in France and the successors to that party, right? We see all of this internationally, and they have their conventions and they push their propaganda, and they have a lot of this right-wing oligarch money, which floods the zone with disinformation. So I think it's great to have a pushback to that. And that's what we're seeing at these conferences. President Lula Brazil said the following: "No president of a republic of one country can interfere in another country's election, ask for votes for another. Where is electoral sovereignty? Where is territorial sovereignty? We must stop telling lies about others in order to destroy them. Latin America is portrayed as a world of drug trafficking. The Arab world is portrayed as a world of terrorism. And who is good in this world?" Again, really directing this at the kind of stereotypes thrown out there by Trump and his regime and others in order to dominate the rest of the world. He also says the following. President Lula says, "The invasion of Iraq was a lie. Where are the weapons of mass destruction that Saddam Hussein supposedly had? They were never found. The invasion by France and England in Libya was another lie that caused enormous damage at that moment in history. The invasion and the genocide carried out by Israel in Gaza is another very big lie. And now the bombing of Israel against Lebanon, on what pretext? And now the invasion by the United States against Iran, on what pretext?" So that's what was happening at this big conference in Spain, in Barcelona. Let me share with you a few more things I'll show you about what Lula was saying as well. This is what he said about Cuba. "Stop this damn blockade on Cuba. Let the Cuban people live their lives. Cuba has problems, yes, but they are Cuba's problems, not Lula's, not Trump's, not the empire's. The U.S. has punished Cuba for decades, sanctions, blockade, regime change attempts. None of it worked. Cubans are still standing, still surviving, still waiting for the world to let them breathe." The things that Lula was saying. And Lula said, look, the Democrats now have a lot of people. Pedro achieved an extraordinary feat. The president of Mexico came. Our flock is growing. Pro-democracy is growing. We must give hope to the world. Otherwise, what happened with Hitler is going to happen again. So that's what was going on there. I want to share with you what was happening at the conference in Turkey, though, so you can hear from yourself what some of these Arab leaders were saying there. So the first I want to share with you right here is a clip of Ayman Safadi, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs for Jordan. And here's what he says. Let me play this clip for you right here. Let's play it.
This war has exposed a lot of fragilities and the collective mechanisms that we have at our hands. So we need to do a lot of soul searching into how we can all come together as a region and develop institutions that will enable us to defend ourselves, but also invest in building the future of peace and security that we want. The other side, we have the issue of Israeli occupation of Palestinian land, the continued Israeli measures that are making the two-state impossible to realize and therefore undermining all prospects for peace. We have to address that because unless we're able to find this just and lasting peace on the basis of the two-state solution, basis that would fulfill the Palestinian people's right to freedom and statehood on their national soil on June 4, 1967 lines, we will not be able to move towards that stable future. But I think now we're facing a new era of Israeli expansionism that's being expressed in public by Israeli ministers who do not hide or are very aggressive in their statements that they want to take more land, that they want to occupy Lebanese land, that they want to occupy Syrian land, that they're not going to allow for the Palestinian people to have their right to freedom and the Palestinian occupied territory fulfilled. And that is a challenge to regional security.
And you hear him saying the very flimsy security umbrella right there. And now I want to share with you next another clip from a guy who's there, Ahmed Abul Gate, the Secretary General from the League of Arab Nations. Here's what he had to say. Play this clip.
As well as those proponents helping Israel to achieve a breakthrough here and there, kept coming all the time to people like me and said, and to Europeans and to foreigners, forget about the Palestinian issue. Forget about the Palestinians. They will remain as is under occupation. but we will normalize with the Arab world, and we will confront Iran, and lastly, the Palestinian question will be forgotten. So the purpose and the objective was forget about Palestine. No Arab or Muslim or a just person can accept the injustice that has been inflicted on the Palestinians. No one ever. So this is the crux. But if the Israelis, as well as the Americans at the time, were offering the Palestinians a political horizon, shyly, I say political horizon, it is a political settlement for their aspirations, for their self-determination, then I would have understood that you want to normalization to precede the Palestinian issue. Well, I accept, but a settlement for Palestine is coming. But to tell me, forget about Palestine, forget about the Palestinian people, we will compel them to emigrate, and we will expel them out of historical Palestine for the sake of newcomers, I do not understand it. So this is the crux.
And again, it's clear he's talking about the United States, Trump and Kushner, there as well. So you see, that's how Middle East nations are talking at their conference. Trump's not invited to any of the stuff. And you see America getting weaker and weaker by the day under Donald Trump. You see it play out right there. And, we bring the receipts here on the MeidasTouch Network. Oh, let me leave you with this. Can I? Governor Walz in Minnesota gave an incredible speech in Barcelona. Let me just share with you two of the big points of his speech. Let's play this first one.
Inequality grows wider. Climate change accelerates terrifyingly. Technology is getting less human. And understandably, that makes people pretty skeptical of government and desperate enough to try anything. If you're wondering what the hell is wrong with Americans, I hear some version of this every day. Look, I don't really like Trump, and I don't know if he's right, but at least he's willing to try and break things and try and make it better. Now, I know that's dumb as hell, but that's how people are feeling. It's that sentiment that feeds into fascism.
And here's another clip of Governor Walz right here. Let's play it.
We've got a feeble-minded, trigger-happy president who plunged us into a war where no threat was present, with no clear objectives and no exit plan. We need to call that what it is. That's fascism. Or at least it's fascist curious, as they would be.
There you have it. Let me know what you think. Hit subscribe. Let's get to 7 million subscribers. Thank you all so much for watching. Help us get to 7 million. You may think you're subscribed, but you may not actually be subscribed. So just double check that you're subscribed. Thanks, everybody.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.